Hi, I'm Christopher L. Bennett, author of Ex Machina, Orion's Hounds, and other fine Star Trek novels. You're listening to The Chronic Rift.
What's your question?
Well, I wonder if you could settle a bet for me and my friends,
Sure.
okay? Like when you left your recorders for the last time and you opened up your safe, what was the combination?
I don't know. I mean, it's been a long time. I don't know that.
Okay.
Okay? Anybody? Oh, all right. Go ahead. You. Go ahead. You in the funny shirt.
Okay. Another bet.
Uh-huh.
Okay. On your horse farm, all right? How many saddle-bred horses do you have?
34.
Wait. Is that including the colt that was born earlier this week?
That mare had a foal?
Tuesday.
Well, I guess it's 35 then.
All right.
You know, before I answer any more questions, there's something I wanted to say. Having received all your letters over the years, and I've spoken to many of you, and some of you have traveled, hundreds of miles to be here, I'd just like to say, get a life, will you, people? I mean, for crying out loud, it's just a TV show. I mean, look at you. Look at the way you're dressed. You've turned an enjoyable little job that I did as a lark for a few years into a colossal waste of time. I mean, how old are you people? What have you done with yourselves? You must be almost 30. Have you ever kissed a girl? I didn't think so. There's a whole world out there. When I was your age, I didn't watch television. I lived. So move out of your parents' basement. And get your own apartments and grow the hell up. I mean, it's just a TV show, damn it. It's just a TV show.
Welcome back, my friends, to an all-new episode of the Chronic Rift podcast. It's your old pal, John S. Drew here, and it's a Star Trek weekend. I don't know if you've realized it, but it is the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, the original TV series, which is something I love. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the original series, and yet we're also getting all the other Star Trek. I don't know. To me, it's like we're celebrating Star Trek. It's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. That should be it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being old-fashioned. What do you think, Billy Flynn of GeekRadioDaily.com? I got you off, didn't I? You don't have the
No, a little bit. I'm sitting in a dark room, so I had to where is the bell exactly?
and you do have a bell. That's not a euphemism.
No. If you're going to plug something, by God, you plug it old school rules and you make the audience know it.
It's just a little weird. And then, for that matter, I noticed that a lot of the... Not the bell. Well, the bell...
Oh.
Do you want me to do it again? GeekRadioDaily.com?
You didn't have to, but I certainly appreciate it. I just put there...
Oh, I thought you wanted to work the bell in.
Well, any chance I get, I do appreciate that.
No, but did you notice the one thing that's so weird about this whole thing is that Enterprise is barely getting mentioned?
I don't think that's unusual in any case. Okay, all right. We could talk about the last season of Enterprise, but other than that, no, there's no problem with it not being referenced at all.
Wow. And what do you think? Welcome also, Krissy Myers.
I must admit, I may or may not have had a couple cups of Earl Grey tea to celebrate Star Trek's birthday.
Earl Grey? Not some soy and brandy?
Earl Grey, hot.
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 I don't know. We're going to get all into that in the second hour of the show. We're going to be talking Star Trek's 50th anniversary, and we're also going to be joined by author-editor Jim Beard to join in this celebration. Michael Faulkner couldn't make it this week. He had some things to take care of, and Keith has been feeling under the weather. I guess that move took more out of him than he thought, but he will be joining us briefly because he's got a TV review this week, so we'll be playing that a little later. As we usually do on the show, though, we do have our Bringing It to the Table segment, and we're going to start with our guest here, Mr. Billy Flynn. What would you like to share with us this time around?
Well, since I have a kid who's about to be 2 years old next month, I'm so far behind on everything, it's ridiculous. So I would like to celebrate for the one time that I'm not crazy far behind, in that just last week I wrapped up Stranger Things.
Ooh. And what was your impression?
It is one of the greatest 80s Stephen King stories I've ever experienced. First episode, my buddy had watched the first episode. He's like, "Hey, are you going to watch the Stranger Things thing?" I was like, "Well, I kind of wanted to see it, yeah, but I'm so far behind." He's like, "Well, just watch the first episode. It's pretty good. So if you want, I'll wait. We'll just watch the whole thing." And so we watched the whole thing. But he'd seen the first episode, so I'm watching it, and I'm like, "Oh." He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Well, this is just an 80s Stephen King story." He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, they're the losers. That's Sheriff George Bannerman. Matthew Modine works for the shop. I mean, that much is obvious, and she's kind of Drew Barrymore. I see how this is going." And he's like, "So you mean it's a ripoff?" I'm like, I'm not ready to say it's a ripoff. So far, and it turns out it is a complete love letter to 80s Stephen King. And what I didn't know when I saw the first episode is the Duffer Brothers who made this. Remember about 3 years ago? They're remaking it now, but 3 years ago they were going to remake it. They were the ones trying to get it remade a couple of years ago. So they said, "Fine, you won't let us? We'll make our own damn Stephen King. That's fine."
So it's their own version of it.
Well, no, there's elements. There's a tiny bit of that, but it's really anything and everything Stephen King you read in the 80s. It's essentially Castle Rock. It's another Castle Rock story, because you got your shady government, you got the group of kids working together. Now, people are trying to compare the kids with their bikes to E.T. I think that's a bit of a stretch. If they want to say they did that, that's fine. But as an 80s guy, having your show start off with a bunch of kids, a bunch of nerds playing D&D in the basement and knowing all the shortcuts in town on their bike, you totally had me. You totally had me. That's my life.
Yeah. It was funny. We were talking about this briefly a couple of weeks ago, me and Michael Faulkner. And the one thing I didn't get was, I saw Matthew Modine's name every week of the credits, and it took me a couple of episodes to realize, oh my God, that's Matthew Modine.
You didn't see him in Weeds about 5 years back, did you?
No. If
you had, then you would have known. Same thing. Would have been the same thing, because in Weeds, when I first saw him in Weeds, I was like, what? Oh, that's a long time since Vision Quest. Yeah, that's Matthew Modine.
Wow. Now, well, all right, let me ask you this, because as you say, you've got the child, television watching is, prime. It's special time for you when you get that. I know, because I went through it with two kids. But when it came to Stranger Things, how long did it take you to watch it?
Oh, wow. Longer than I meant to, and not completely her fault. We had the one time a neighbor was sort of hanging out and didn't get the subtle clues that you need to go, because I'm trying to get in an episode of Stranger Things before I go to bed. So I'll say it took me about a week. It took me about a week to watch it.
Okay.
How sad is that? When that's a long time now to watch a season of a show.
Especially with one that's only 8 episodes.
I know. Do you know how disappointed I was when I realized that? Because I got to episode 6, and I'm like, I know my Stephen King. We're about to wrap this thing up. How many episodes are there? Well, there's usually 13 on these things. Oh, look, we have 2 left.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
But we were talking about that also.
Wanting more.
Well, but see, that's the beauty of it. This is something we were also talking about, is that, Michael and I, was that this is actually better. It's like that whole thing, always leaving wanting more. We've got these series that do 20, 22, 24 episodes. You joked about Enterprise, and I was listening to another podcast the other day, The Palace of Glittering Delights, where Andrew Leyland was talking about Enterprise and how he went back to revisit it. But he said one of the problems with Enterprise was that most of the episodes were self-contained, and 26 weeks of self-contained stories, and they're not all that good. You sort of lose it after a while. It's when you get to the 3rd season where they have the arc going on with the Xindi and such. Mind you, that could have been shorter. And then you get to the 4th season, and the 4th season is all self-contained 3-4 part stories. That's pretty cool. That's what we need more of. I really don't think we need this anymore when it comes to our TV, and I wish the networks would follow the lead of FX and HBO and the others and like have a fall series of, slate of shows and then a spring slate of shows that are totally different and run 13 weeks. I think our television experience would be so much better for it.
Yeah, basically more of a UK model, like how the BBC does limited series. They'll do runs of 6 or 8 or 13, and just sort of as long as the series requires, and you can go and you can come back to it whenever you want. It doesn't necessarily have to stick to a strict September-October debut schedule with 22 episodes every season. Mm-hmm. It's almost too much now. Shorter series benefit from being short. That means that there's more space and more time for people to consume things, because there is so much now, and there is such an oversaturation of the market because we have network and cable and now all streaming with Netflix and Hulu and a bunch of other streaming services coming up with original content. It's getting to the point now where television viewers simply don't have time to dedicate themselves to a 22-episode season because they'd be depriving themselves of really great storytelling, great succinct storytelling. So I am definitely with you on that.
Do you remember Jericho?
Vaguely, yes.
Skeet Ulrich was in Jericho.
Yes,
I like the Kevin Bacon in 3.
I'll tell you, that's the perfect example, and I think that's where it finally struck me that we need these shorter seasons. CBS had done the whole season of Jericho the first season, and they canceled it, but then they had that, I think it was the Nuts campaign where they brought it back. It only got 7 episodes for the second season, but wow, what a second season that was. Those 7 episodes were so tight and just, because they had only so much time. When you give more time to the producers, they're going to, kind of meander from time to time in indulgent sort of things where they think they're doing great character development, and in the end it's kind of like, it's boring.
Well, that's the problem with the traditional network schedule. If it's like, you need 23 episodes, you need 31 episodes, and this is your time frame, this is how long you've got, fill. You could find yourself trying to explore some characters, but really just producing some filler. I mean, sometimes the networks don't know when to let things go. I loved Lost, but that one season did sort of meander quite a bit. I like that the networks, for them, they're taking chances because now they have, these limited series events. and that's just, they used to call them a miniseries, but now a miniseries can really be a 13-week show. They're trying, not easily. They've had to fight to come to this, but they are trying to experiment with it a little bit. Cable networks able to do it a little bit easier because is it TBS with Angie Tribeca?
Yes.
When the entire season in one day. Here you go. Here's the entire season one day. No commercials even, which I was like, ooh, you're really trying to be Netflix now. And then they turned around and showed it their regular way. I like that things like Stranger Things and all these other services are making the networks go, wait a minute, we do have to look at this a little different. How much they're willing to embrace it, well, it remains to be seen.
Now, I also like the fact that we're getting a second season. Of course, it leaves all the questions of what happens with certain characters. Are we going to just sort of leave it there like that? Without getting into spoilers, there are 2 characters in particular who disappear in the course of the series, one in the middle and one at the end, and it's like, are we done with them? And we've come to love them. I mean, even to the point where one of them, I just saw a prototype for her Funko action figure.
Ha! Before or after?
Before.
Yes, because after knows exactly what it is. That's been her character specifically. Can we at least say her name?
Sure.
Cool, because Barb has just captured the imagination of everybody in the world so much that last Monday, one of my trivia teams was, why doesn't everyone care about Barb? Was their team. I mean, this has really done something. But here's where I'm going to step out. I think I'm going to be a little different than everybody else. Do we really want a season 2? I ask this question because this is 80s Stephen King. And 80s Stephen King had a lot of great, crazy, insane ideas. But he never had to completely explain all of them. And if you do another season, we're going to have to start answering some questions. And I don't know if our answers are going to be nearly as interesting as the questions are.
Or that we're going to be satisfied with the answers.
Possibly. Because if they wanted to do like Stranger Things and just tell me a completely different season of other people and crazy things, sure. But when you consider the roller coaster ride those kids alone went on, in all their wonderful planning of staying away from the shop, can you do that in the second season? I mean, well, don't get me wrong. Their little 1 month later prologue, which had me pulling my hair out going, what are you doing sitting next to that guy? And stuff. I'd like to know how these things got to where they were. But, I don't know how this can't help but feel like a sequel if they do it.
Rather than a continuation.
80, and I'm talking 80, so it's an 80s sequel, which means it's automatically not good.
Yeah, now that I think about it, you're right.
Right? Because, I mean, so what's going to happen? They're going to start to see L again. Maybe get some transmissions, have to figure this out. It'll be frequency. Mm-hmm. And we already have the CW's already doing frequency.
Yeah. I don't know. All I know is that when the 8 episodes were over, my wife just looked at me and said, I have to wait a year for more of this. And I was like, well, yeah.
Welcome to my world, honey.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to wait a year for a show. Oh, okay. Yeah. How many years I waited for a Lord of the Rings adaptation? Come on.
Yeah. Speaking of waiting, what I want to bring to the table this time around is the Tick. Amazon has and I don't get this because I didn't know if they did this with other shows, but apparently they've got 3 shows right now that are vying for the opportunity to be fully produced and developed into series by Amazon. The Tick is one of them. I've forgotten what the other 2 are, but I don't recall them doing this with any other show. I don't recall them doing it with Man in the High Castle. Do you?
No, for Man in the High Castle, I know they just made like the 1 episode that I got to watch a couple of times before they ever decided to say they were going to make a full series, but I don't remember it being part of a competition.
Right. And that's frustrating because, honest to God, this is really good. I don't know, have either of you seen Amazon's Tick yet?
Yeah.
You have?
I did. I was nervous like a lot of us when we got our first picture because the guy just in the suit just doesn't look right.
The suit doesn't look right at all. I will say that much. I don't like the suit.
So that was a little off, but I'm watching the episode and like right away they kick things off and I'm like, okay, this is it. By the time the thing is over, I was just like, wow, I cannot believe what a bad job people do of promoting stuff, because Amazon was like, well, yeah, this Tick is going to be it's going to be more gritty, and that sounded so awful. It sounded so awful. If you had just said, this is a world where superheroes have existed to the point where people are used to it by now, that form of realism works really well for the complete silly that's in the show. It brings those 2 different angles into this wonderful hurricane of hilarity. I'm trademarking that phrase, by the way.
Well, I agree with you on that, in the sense that there is that hilarity, but I think what they played up way too much is that this is a darker show. It's a little darker than the cartoon. It's darker than the Patrick Warburton version. Absolutely. And I kind of appreciate that. I don't think they needed to play it up so much, though, that it's like, oh my God, this is gritty realism, because that was never the Tick.
I know, the way they were talking, I kept expecting, I'm like, great, if I watch this and he goes, I'm the goddamn Tick, I'm going to be really upset. But we did not get that, and I was very happy. I'm also very happy to say that regardless of the costume and how that guy looks, when he speaks, he is the Tick.
Once he starts talking, you can ignore the costume. Speaking of costumes, though, I actually like Arthur's costume better.
That looks really cool.
Yeah.
That's the first time I'm like, you know what? I kind of really want to put together a sidekick costume.
Yes. And I like the fact that Dot gets introduced right off the bat here. I think we had to wait a little while for her in the cartoon, and I don't remember if we ever saw her in Patrick Warburton's series.
I don't think so. Yeah. I don't remember.
But and of course, best of all, you've got Jackie Earle Haley. Come on.
chewing every tiny bit of scenery that there is, every fiber of his being. This has been a good year for him between Preacher and this. Good year for Jackie.
Yeah. Krissy, have you had a chance to see it? Krissy? Did we lose the Krissy?
Oh no! Wait a minute. Let me look at my screen.
I'm looking at my screen. She's still here. Krissy?
She went for a snack. She's like, they're just running their mouth.
They're just running their mouth off about.
Oh, see, there she is.
Okay, I'm here.
Back to
Listening
sound to agree with.
intently. Yes.
We got nervous there. We were talking about the Tick. Have you had a chance to see it?
No, I haven't seen the new Tick yet. Is there a new Tick?
Where have you? What? We just totally. What?
I know, we just went off on this. That was great. It's on Amazon. And apparently they're doing this weird thing where they have 3 shows, and the Tick is one of them, and everyone gets to watch the show, and you get to vote on which one becomes an actual series, which seems like a lot of waste of money to me. It's not cheap to make a pilot for other shows. You're going to make 3 and let us, the audience, pick? That's weird.
My goodness, it's television democracy at its most brutal and finest. Goodness.
Actually, I like that.
Brutal and finest.
And of course, what gets me is that I didn't, as I say, I don't even remember the names of the other 2 shows. I didn't see them. But the Tick ends on, I wouldn't say a cliffhanger, but it's a continuation. It's like they purposely set it up so it's like, well, if you want to see more, you better vote for us. Mind you, I did, but just the same.
Oh, absolutely.
It is the Tick.
I remember there was one of the other 2 shows, and I don't remember what either one of them are about now, but I remember at the time one of the other 2 shows had an interesting concept. I was like, oh, I'll have to check that out after this, because I really didn't think I was going to love the Tick as much as I did. But afterwards, I went and just voted for it. I didn't even think about the other 2 shows at all. They played right to their strength. Hey, Geek, you love this. Look, we're going to do a decent job. Vote.
And I will say one other thing I don't know why, it just made the fanboy in me really giddy, was as he's jumping from building to building, the realization of the impact of his landing, as the building crumbles a little bit under him.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing to keep. And that's what I'm talking about. It's the straightforward seriousness. Like, these are not the bad guys that we saw on the show are not stupid henchmen type of people. They may not be brilliant, but they're not overly exaggeratedly dumb. So to have all of that sort of this grim and be real, and then to have something as silly as I'm just this big, heavy, nigh invulnerable gentleman crushing things. There's something about those 2 worlds existing and nobody having a problem with it that just automatically makes me giggle.
Well, folks, I'm going to tell you, head on over to Amazon.com. To be fair, if you want to, I didn't. I went for the Tick because that's the only reason I went. But I have been a Tick fan. And oddly enough, never read a comic, though.
Really?
Never read a comic.
Interesting. This really does feel like the comic to me. And I know Ben Edlund's quite heavily involved. But the comic has moments that, even for its sheer absurdity, are grounded into some form of realization, because in the comic, the Tick had to deal with ninjas, and nobody really enjoyed that.
No.
He was ninjas. To him that they were like bugs. They were ants at your picnic. Like, ninjas. Oh, ninjas.
Well,
they killed people.
I'm sorry.
But they killed people.
Yeah.
So you had some realism, but you had a guy that thought they were like ants.
Yeah. Well, folks, head on over. I'll put links as well, just so you can specifically on the show notes so that you could click right to the episode, take a watch on it. I mean, I love it. I've got my Roku, so I managed to watch it on my TV, and it is brilliant on a big 51-inch TV watching the Tick. And like I say, yeah, even though I'm disappointed in the costume, once, and what was his name again? Peter Serafinowicz.
Yeah, I wasn't going to try to attempt that this early.
Don't know anything that guy's ever been in. That I can...
Oh, wait, he was in NYPD Blue. He was the partner of Jimmy Smits, right? Never mind. Sorry.
Oh, actually, I just clicked on him here on IMDb. Apparently, he was in Guardians of the Galaxy and Shaun of the Dead.
Really?
What did he play?
In Guardians of the Galaxy, he was Daenerys Saul.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, loved it. So.
and in Shaun of the Dead, he played Pete.
Okay, yes.
Oh, and he was also the voice of the Fisher King in the Doctor Who episode Before the Flood.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
there you go.
Ooh,
That's cool.
He's got
That
creds.
That's a nice medley.
He did an episode. Actually, he did 2 episodes of Archer. Oh. Now he's somebody in my mind.
Oh yeah, you've been on Archer, Doctor Who. Pfft, hey now.
IT Crowd.
Wow.
Yeah.
This might be the coolest actor ever. Those are a lot of my buttons being pushed right there.
Very good credentials, right? Yeah. That's
Yes.
And it's not, and that's just what's throwing me now, though. You'd think that, I mean, looking at him, you'd think he would stand out, knowing that face, that I would be like, oh yeah, you're right, he was blah 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 in that, but I'm still not. You're saying all these things, and I'm still not able to see him in them.
Perhaps that's the hallmark of a particularly skilled performer. He's able to disappear into his own roles.
Chameleon.
It's a chameleon.
I blend. Actors do not make people look at them; they look through them.
And he's British.
Oh, well, I guess we still have to accept him.
Well, no, I think that's pretty impressive that he's able to affect such a good tick voice.
Oh,
it is a good, steady, strong.
Yeah.
Oh, I have something to bring to the table now that you mention it.
Okay, there you go.
Now that you mentioned British voices,
yes, this relates to British voices. So I was at Fan Expo the past weekend, and one of the major guests and major draws at his 3rd convention appearance was Daredevil Charlie Cox. And I was out on the town on the Saturday night, and we were heading to a bar, and a lot of my friends from the Doctor Who Society were also at said bar, and my friend Donna, perfect name for a Doctor Who Society member, comes up to me and she gleefully announces that Charlie Cox is in the bar, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. And so, of course, myself and my group are sat right next to Charlie Cox at the bar, and I think I recognize him, and I'm like, he seems familiar, but why is he talking with an English accent? And then I had absolutely no idea that Charlie Cox was from England. I only know him as Daredevil putting on the American accent, and he's completely had me fooled. I had absolutely no idea that he was from England until I heard him talk in the bar.
Who is this imposter?
Who is this imposter? And he ended up turning out to be a very lovely person. He actually instigated a conversation with me and confirmed his Charlie Coxness, and we actually had a nice chat for about 30 minutes about different documentaries that we had seen and movies, and we traded a couple Marlon Brando stories. He was actually very nice.
So we now have a new adjective, Charlie Coxness. Okay.
Charlie Coxness, yes.
Hey, that's some good Charlie Coxness you have going there. Why
Yeah, you've been Charlie Coxed, or Hugh Lauried, or you have successfully achieved an American accent and have fooled us all.
That is pretty impressive. It's quite impressive. It's not easy. It's not easy to do either way.
No.
Sliding in there, but especially since his American accent doesn't have an accent, because Andrew Lincoln, you get to do a sort of Southern accent, which sometimes I think he goes a little too far, but his is just like a regular, quote unquote, regular person accent. That's quite impressive.
Mm-hmm. It was just you would assume if you had never, much like myself, like I did, if you had never seen him in anything else or recognized him from anything else, you would just assume that he was an American actor. But no, he spoke with a thick South London accent, and I was thrown for a loop.
Okay, now the big question. Pictures?
No, I didn't get selfies with him.
I'm afraid it didn't happen. We know the rule.
Oh, it happened. It happened.
It didn't happen. I'm sorry. I didn't write the rules. I did not.
Oh, it didn't feel appropriate though. It would have ruined the moment.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand. That's one thing too. It's like you said, it would have ruined the moment. You were there at that moment and you were having the moment. I read an article about this not the other day, it was a couple of weeks ago, about people who take out their phones to record bits of concert. I mean, besides the fact that you're, breaking all sorts of copyright rule, it's like you're there for a concert. Watch the concert, and you're there with the phone held up, and it's just you're missing the moment for that.
Well,
concert.
I heard some stand-up comedian. I don't remember his name, but he was talking with people about an interview, and he's like, playing bigger places where they have screens. He's like, I get it for the people in the back. But he's like, I'm working the crowd, and I got people in the first 2 or 3 rows looking at the screen, and I'm like, what are you doing? I'm right in front of you. Are you that addicted to television that there's a screen, I have to watch it?
Yeah, I've got to admit, I've done that from time to time. If I've been close to the stage, glanced up at the screen just to see, I don't know what I'm looking for, but it just happened, I guess.
I will take a picture or two and then put my phone away promptly, and it's only if something significant happens. So I try very hard, especially as someone who is a photographer, to limit my camera time on my off time. Like if I'm there to photograph a show as my job, then yes, I'll click away, but that's my function. That's why I'm there. I'm not necessarily there to see the show. I'm there to document it, so that's a little different. But I am also around so that other people don't have to document it, and they can use my photos to remember their experience as well.
Oh, you and your professional camera. I've got my phone. I think I can do just fine, is what they're saying.
Ooh, yes, yes.
When I went to see
a picture of her taking a picture, look how meta that is.
Yeah. When I went to see Match Game a few months back, the pages actually were walking around and telling people to put phones away. And, they just didn't want... Not during the game, actually before the game even started. And it was funny, there was one page who walked up to this woman and took her phone and went through it and started deleting photos that the woman had taken. And I thought, wow, that was really rough. Found out later that it was actually her mother. She didn't want to get in any trouble.
Oh, okay.
I was like, that's kind of Gestapo.
It's crazy security. So was the new Match Game worth it? Because I didn't have the heart to even try.
I enjoyed myself immensely watching the live show, and I saw the very first episode, so Baldwin was still a little stiff and not comfortable in the role. I think it was one of those things where it was like probably, hey, I loved Match Game. I can be like Gene Rayburn. And then he got up there and he was like, oh my, because he even was holding the mic wrong at one point.
Okay.
He was holding the mic wrong and then forgetting to put it up to his mouth. Because he probably was so used to being clipped or something that he didn't think to. But I've been watching the show, and I hear some people, being rough on it and saying, oh, it's over-sexualized. I'm like thinking, it's Match Game. Match Game was over-sexualized.
Yeah, that's what made it popular, the fact that they put it there for you to fill in the blanks that way.
Right, exactly.
No pun intended.
I mean, I can't watch Family Feud. It is god-awful. I love Steve Harvey. I think he's an excellent host. But what they give him to work with so that he just works blue for the whole show with the questions and stuff, it's stupid. And I think it's a waste of time. But Match Game is actually tame still in comparison to the sex jokes and such. I enjoy watching it. And so far, he's actually brought in celebrities. That was the other thing I got nervous about. I thought we were going to start seeing Kim Kardashian and the latest winner of Survivor as the celebrities. He's got some real people up there. So I would say give it a look.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of celebrities then?
He's had, let's see, David Alan Grier. He's had Rosie. I mean, that was going without saying. Rosie O'Donnell was going to be there. Sheryl Crow. Who else?
Now, see, you were doing good until Sheryl Crow. You said Sheryl Crow, and I'm like, wow, that seems kind of strange.
Well,
But
I guess
Rosie, I like. She's Brett Butler nowadays, I suppose.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Well, who's the modern day Charles Nelson Riley?
the closest thing would be Michael Ian Black.
I like that.
And they did have him for one. See, the thing is, they haven't been consistent. There's no regulars. Rosie's been on a couple. When she's on, she gets, what's her name's position? I can't think of her name now.
Brett Summers.
Brett Summers. She gets Brett Summers' position. So, Michael Ian Black got Charles Nelson Riley. But like, oh God, what is his name from 30 Rock? Who played Kenneth the Page?
Jack McBrayer?
Yeah. He's been on a couple of episodes and he bounces around from one to another. I mean, it comes down to, I'm sure many of these people who are on there, kind of like Whoopi Goldberg a decade before with Hollywood Squares, it's Alec Baldwin's friends who are coming on and doing this for him. You know.
Who is the Richard Dawson, you think?
The closest... And this is going to sound weird. I really liked him, although a lot of people was in the very first episode. He had on J.B. Smoove. And I actually thought he was pretty funny in the Richard Dawson position. But
yes.
All other comments I've heard about it were like, oh my God, what the hell was he doing there? So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird. No, I am weird, but...
That goes without saying. That bears no... meaning of this conversation.
Exactly. But give it a watch. I mean, I enjoy. I'm loving. I mean, if you were ever a fan of the original Pyramid, $100,000 Pyramid is exactly like watching the '70s show. I mean, Michael Strahan, other than he's a tall black man instead of a short white man, it really plays well. They're not playing up the sex on that at all. Every once in a while there's a cute little innuendo joke and such, but it's just straightforward gameplay. And I'm actually surprised considering how it's sandwiched between these two other shows that are so raunchy that it actually managed to survive. I figured that it wasn't going to get renewed, but all three shows are coming back for the summer of 2017.
Never underestimate the palate cleanser.
Yeah.
You know what I find odd about the Steve Harvey's Family Feud? You know, you're talking about the things, how it gets a little blue or whatever. Some of what they decide are the actual answers to put on the board strike me as incredibly odd sometimes. I don't even have an example, which just makes me a dumb person. But instead of something simple like, you know, the answer is ball. It's like this weird rotating, whirling blob. They use something that no one would ever say as one of the answers on the board to go for a laugh, and it's usually something a little more of leaning toward the blue side, which is never an impression I got from Family Feud, even though Richard Dawson made out with everyone.
Yeah. You know, it's funny too because I've gone back to watching some of the old Family Feuds on Buzzer, and actually I don't even think Game Show Network bothers with those versions anymore with any of the others other than Steve Harvey, because every time Family Feud's on Game Show Network, it's repeats of Steve Harvey. There were some moments of, you know, innuendo. I wouldn't call it straight out blue, but maybe for the 70s and the 80s it was raunchy. But it's interesting to note that after Richard Dawson got married to one of his producers, he promised, and he would say this from time to time in the later episodes, you know, I won't kiss you because I promised my wife I wouldn't.
Aww.
Yeah. But when he did kiss, God, it wasn't even just a kiss on the cheek. He was full on the lips.
Oh yeah, he went right for it.
Like, I'm Richard Dawson. You're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
And you know what Richard Dawson had going for him, at least on Match Game, is that he was the contestant, or rather not the contestant, the panelist that could best get into the heads of the contestants playing. So if you picked Richard for something, it was usually a sure bet that you would win and advance to the next round. He was very good at playing off the contestants, not just the female contestants, but just all of the contestants in general. That's kind of where that's a lot of where the charm came into, is that he was actually quite a good asset on the show.
That's why he was generally your number one go-to for the big match. You're picking Richard. No one at that point ever really went Brett.
No, Brett was the worst choice. She always had the least strong answers. CNR was kind of hit and miss, but it was always fun to pick him because he's Charles Nelson Riley, my personal favorite panelist. But Richard was always the go-to, especially for the ladies.
Well, then in that case, in the new version, the Richard Dawson would actually then be Rosie O'Donnell, because she was always the go-to that everybody was picking, and she usually came through for most of the contestants in the episodes I've seen so far. She's appeared in, I think, like 3 or 4 out of the run of 8 or 9 that they've done. I don't think they're done yet either. I think there's still like another week or 2 until the Sunday night programming. It's funny, I don't watch a lot of modern day television, although mind you, my weeknights are now going to be taken up with CW superhero slots.
Yeah. And how long until the network is just all superhero show? The DC network.
The DC network. They'll change it, from CW to DC.
At this point, because who'd have thought?
Yeah. Who'd
have really thought? That's strange. And there's more. You can just keep doing more and more. They could have a complete movie universe and a complete TV universe, then go incredibly crazy and do crossovers.
Yeah.
And then just during the day, it's just cheap syndicated programming. Maybe some comic book series from the 70s, like a certain Wonder Woman series might be good, or Batman 66, just during their daytime programming. It would be super cheap. New format.
Get us the Adventures of Super Pup.
Yeah. So retro daytime program, and then brand new primetime.
Did you see that Super Pup thing from the 60s?
Yeah.
Oh, Krissy, if you ever get a chance, I think it's up on YouTube. Put in like the Adventures of Super Pup, and it's basically using all these Adventures of Superman sets, but instead of obviously George Reeves and Noel Neill and them playing the roles, they were actors wearing giant puppy heads.
Yep.
Oh, it's very Sid and Marty Krofft. It's Sid and Marty Krofft meets DC superheroes. Fascinating.
Yep. But the Sid and Marty Krofft costumes are much better put together, because in this one, like, one of our bad guys is like an evil scientist, and there's a moment where he goes to mix some stuff together, and the poor guy in the suit, you can totally see that he's blindly reaching out to the table to try to find the thing he knows, because he can't see it all.
Oh no, Sid and Marty Krofft actually cared about what they put on television, and they were very diligent about that. But
well, they cared. They cared that they had something they thought kids would love that would be a quick and easy buck for them. They cared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I actually just picked up the first season of Seymour, and the Sea Monster. Why am I blanking on the name? I just bought it.
Sigmund
and the Sea Monsters. Why was I saying Seymour? Yeah, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. I got the first season on DVD the other day.
I wanted to say Sigmund, but suddenly Seymour.
Suddenly Seymour. I don't know why. I don't know where Seymour came from.
Well,
I meant Sigmund. It is early.
He kind of looks a little like Seymour from Little Shop of Horrors, maybe.
That's probably where my brain went.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, I meant Sigmund and the Sea Monsters.
Do you know I've never seen that show?
What? You've never seen Sigmund and the Sea Monster?
I have never seen Sigmund and the Sea Monsters.
Wait, you do all these 70s podcasts. What in the hell is wrong with you?
We all have blank spots. It's okay.
Well, maybe that's what we should do.
That just seems to be right up your alley, though. I mean...
You would think, right? Maybe
at this point, you would have had to have gone out of your way to not see this at least one time. With the company you keep?
Maybe that's what we need to do, though. We could have a podcast, because like Krissy and I are doing a Star Trek podcast now from the perspective of someone who's watched the episodes many times, and Krissy who's maybe watched the odd episode here and there but hasn't seen the whole series. So it's fresh to her. Maybe we could do the reverse. It could be fresh to me, Sigmund and the Sea Monster podcast.
Yes, we could do a whole Sid and Marty Krofft retrospective.
I'm down for that. The moment you want to do that, you just let me know.
Okay. I mean, I'm good with all the later stuff, Land of the Lost, and of course my all-time favorite, near to my heart, Electro Woman and Dyna Girl.
Oh yes, classic.
Now, speaking of that, and we're talking about remakes with the Tick and all, and Match Game, has anybody seen the Electro Woman and Dyna Girl movie?
I have not seen that.
The new one?
Yeah.
No.
Oof. I'm sorry. It's funny. I saw the Electro Woman and Dyna Girl pilot they did in 2001 with Marky Post as Electro Woman. I got more excited by that, and a lot of people poo-pooed that. I got more excited by that. This new movie is just, it's almost like Bionic Woman from 2008. It's like, why did you even bother? Why didn't you just call these two women randomly generic names? And you could have even said it was a spoof of Electro Woman and Dyna Girl. It's awful. I don't know. I was not happy with it.
There was a period in the noughts where Sid and Marty Krofft were trying to revive a lot of their properties, and the Land of the Lost film didn't do well, and because
I wanted it to.
Yeah. And because it wasn't bad, but because it didn't do well, the Sigrid and the Sea Monsters movie that they had planned was unfortunately axed, and I would have liked to have seen it too, because they had I believe Dana Gould was at the helm of that. I believe he was the one who was penning it, and he's quite a talented writer, and I would have liked to have seen that.
Did either one of you ever watch Mr. Show with Bob Odenkirk and David Cross?
Oh yes, that's a classic too.
Okay, well then, John, once you see Sigmund and have enough of your Sid and Marty Krofft, they did a sketch, a little parody of Sid and Marty Krofft shows. Theirs was Sam and Criminy Kraft present the altered state of Drugatusis.
Yep.
Which is a spot-on perfect parody of the entire thing. So yeah, that will be the culmination. We'll do the show of all the Sid and Marty Krofft you missed, and then the final episode will be a commentary on the altered state of Drugatusis.
Now, did you know that one time they were actually considering making a Sid and Marty Krofft like amusement park?
Yeah, I read an article about that. Yeah. How awesome would that have been?
How nightmare-inducing that may have been for many children as well.
No, see, kids totally get that. That's the thing. Adults, especially them on hallucinogenics, are going to have a problem. But kids totally get that world.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, the kids eat it up with a spoon. I mean, I did.
It's like Dr. Seuss. Have you been to Universal for the Dr. Seuss land area they have? Okay, well, they have a Dr. Seuss, the little small Dr. Seuss section. And yeah, if you're a kid, all this ridiculous stuff just makes complete and total sense. There's no problem. And if you can get back to that, I think we could all enjoy Croftland. What would we call it? Croft Acres?
The amusement park that never... I mean, almost as good as Argo.
Oh, I'm going to segue here a little bit. Speaking of Dr. Seuss, I want to plug a Kickstarter that's on Kickstarter right now. It's called All the Places You'll Boldly Go, and it's a new project by David Gerrold, drawn by Ty Templeton, and it's essentially a Star Trek version of Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss.
Okay.
Yes. So, and apparently this is a whole series of Star Trek Dr. Seuss themed books by this team. And there's also The Trouble with Tribbles and The World of Star Trek by the same team. And they're sitting at about $13,000 of their $20,000 goal with 19 days to go.
Well, that would be that would be interesting.
Yes, and I know Ty is a particularly talented artist, and he was one of the artists on Batman 66 as well.
Yeah,
he also did he do some work on like the comic book out of that, the Gotham Adventures?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and Star Trek. He did Is it Mission's End?
Yep.
Look at me. Yes. Okay. The caffeine has kicked in somewhat.
Yes.
Didn't he also, though, do some of the art on Justice League?
Yes, he's done Justice League, Spider-Man. He's done a lot of Simpsons comics.
So you're basically saying he was born to do this project?
Basically, yes.
Well, from what I remember from Justice League, then, his art style lends itself to doing something in a Seuss-like fashion.
Yes, he has that. He has sort of a perfect blend of cartoon, but also, yes, like definitely well suited for a project like this.
All right, very cool, very cool. So we'll put a link up for that as well.
Yes.
Because I love me some Ty Templeton. I love me some David Gerrold, although he don't love me anymore.
Oh.
What did you do?
I think he got tired of my political rants about, how Hillary wasn't an answer either. So he defriended me on Facebook.
Oh, I see.
The election cycle this time, so many people have decided they no longer needed me in their Facebook lives. And I'm okay, well,
okay.
I'll be here.
Yeah. I'll be here when it's all over.
I'll be here. It's fine. I mean, keep in mind I disagreed with you, but I didn't call you any kind of weird name and decide to just take my stuff and go home.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing. He never said a word. He never commented or anything. It just one day I noticed.
Really?
I saw some, because he's still open. He posts openly, so I still see his posts, and I'm linked to follow him now because I still love the guy. I mean, it's a matter of political disagreement. That's all we have. I love his writing, but he's so entranced with Hillary that I guess there was just no way. And if anybody says otherwise, you're off my list. I don't want to talk to you. You're beneath, humanity level. So.
Well, that's odd. I don't know that I've ever been. I'm sure I have. I don't know if I've been defriended by someone that didn't actually get personally insulted just by talking to me on something.
Oh no! Actually, that's the thing. Yeah, this one was just silent.
Wow! I didn't even have to interact with you to know I never want to talk to you.
and again, that's just my assumption.
So, mystery solvers. Hey, Clue Club.
Clue Club. The mystery of David Gerrold.
Oh, Clue Club, but not Sigmund the Sea Monster. What the hell, sir?
Oh, I remember the Clue Club theme and all. Oh, God. That's sad. You know what? We spoke here so long that we actually don't have time now for the reviews today. That's okay.
Oops.
We'll save them for another time. But we're going to take a break here. And as we go to break, we're going to hear from our own Dan Persons, movie critic, who is taking a few moments to talk to us here about Star Trek's 50th anniversary. And it's a perfect way to sort of segue into the next hour where Jim Beard will be joining us to talk about Star Trek's 50th. So we will be back in roughly about 8 minutes, and we'll see you then.
I'm Dan Persons, not exactly a movie reviewer this time around, for Hour of the Wolf. It should be easy to talk about Star Trek's 50th anniversary, shouldn't it? Drop a few lines about Gene Roddenberry's optimistic view of the future, Mr. Spock, plywood sets, racial equality, Bill Shatner's waistline, and you're done. It's being done like that all over the place. I can't do that. If I'm talking about a particular episode or a particular film, I can focus down, weigh the merits of that particular work. But to talk about the whole of Trek, 50 years of it, that addresses something fundamental in me, something I've never fully explored. Right now on the wall behind me, as I speak, I've mounted a replica of the intercom panel from the USS Enterprise from the original series. If you don't remember it, on screen, it wasn't all that much. A red rectangle with a wedge-shaped signal light, another round red light, a push button, and a speaker grid. And yet, the first time I saw it being offered on the Think Geek website, and it's still available there, it's not that expensive if you're into that kind of thing, I didn't hesitate to buy it. And more, at first sight of it, I knew I had to have it, had to have its physical presence, had to be able to push that button. Even more, if I turn now and look at that intercom, that odd and not very artful conglomeration of science fiction widgets, button and lights and speaker grill, a sensation comes over me that I can only describe as a sense of peace and satisfaction. Okay, I think the word I'm looking for here is fetish. Let me add that on a shelf below that intercom rests a replica of the original series tricorder, phaser, and communicator, along with a few replicas from Next Gen and even some from J.J. Abrams films. Looking at them invokes the same feelings of serenity. Playing with them, which I do, brings a profound sense of joy. To fetishize something is to imbue it with a power it doesn't really have. The physical thing enforces the fantasy, and vice versa. This is usually put into a sexual context, but it doesn't need to be. It could be that the object evokes a world, a future one dreams of. I have experienced all 50 years of Star Trek in real time. I was 11 years old when The Man Trap, the first Star Trek episode to air, debuted, and I was stunned. Lost in Space primed my interest in science fiction, but Star Trek set the hook. At an age when I wasn't prone to deep analysis, the show attached itself to me in ways I couldn't begin to understand. It happened on two fronts. One was its pure physical nature, the bridge of the Enterprise, its corridors, the look of the ship as it moved through space. There was a special this past weekend on National Geographic where one person noted that the Enterprise wasn't designed to be a real spaceship, but to look beautiful. And it did. The disk and engineering section and nacelles giving it a dimensionality that no other screen spaceship, or real-life spaceship for that matter, had. Back in college, I actually wrote a paper about how the design of the Enterprise was used to tell dramatic stories. To 11-year-old me, there was a palpable realness to it. For all the plywood that went into the scenery and styrofoam rocks that littered the planet's surfaces, it was a future that seemed attainable, that I could see myself inhabiting. And then there was the second front, that this was not just a future I could live in, but that I would want to live in. At that point in my life, I wasn't really focused on issues like racial equality and war and peace. But when Captain Kirk screamed to the Metrons that there would be no more killing today, when Spock mind-melded with visibly terrifying Horta and discovered something that equated to true humanity within, Roddenberry's master plan was enacted in me in its purest form. The boy that I was, who was just evolving out of the binary comfort of good and evil into a more nuanced perception of the world, subliminally grasped the message of humanity striving to be better, more open, more understanding. That this was all set in the context of grand adventure, buoyed by William Shatner's attitude that whatever the dangers, space was going to be a downright gas. And for whatever sins Shatner committed on and off camera, let's all admit that nobody could have conveyed that feeling better than he did. It just made it all the more desirable. We could be great, and the future could be fun. There's another thing about fetishism, an almost instinctual understanding that whatever you fixated your fantasies on, it isn't the real thing. The tricorder on my shelf is just a plastic box with some lights and a sound effects chip. The Star Trek future, traveling through space at warp speeds and encountering life forms whose lives are at least somewhat analogous to our own, is, by the laws of physics and probability, a near impossibility. And looking at how humanity has progressed in the 50 years that Star Trek has been around, there's definite progress, but there's still so much we need to do to hit Roddenberry's vision of true harmony, Earth as paradise. The danger of fetishism is fixating on the fantasy to the exclusion of all else, letting the ideal distract from what we can make reality. There will be a new Trek next year, and I am looking forward to it. I'm still not sure I'm willing to cough up $6 a month to experience it with commercials yet, but we can talk about what a lovely future Roddenberry had dreamed for us, It means nothing if we don't let that dream guide our actions, make life better, richer, more fun, more exciting. Beaming down to a planet may be forever beyond our reach. Becoming better as humans is certainly within our grasp. The great bird probably would have agreed.
I wish there was a podcast I could listen to every day to keep up with the geeky world. Someplace I could find out about news, movies, comics, and video games. All that available every single day. There's no way a podcast could do it. I guess I'm just a dreamer.
Hey, geek! Wake up! Geek Radio Daily is the podcast of your dreams. Go to geekradiodaily.com. Subscribe through iTunes or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Geek Radio Daily provides your daily dose of geek, comics, movies, video games, news, and more. It's all the geek without the wait.
Attention, attention. Are you a fan of MASH, one of the most groundbreaking television series in history? Then take a listen to the MASH 4077 podcast, where hosts Kenny, Simon, and Al discuss their thoughts episode by episode. They will also share with you some little-known behind-the-scenes information, trivia, and so much more. So come and find them on iTunes by searching MASH 4077 podcast or online at www.mash4077podcast.com.
Many such journeys are possible. Let me be your gateway.
Space. The final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
And we're back for the second hour of the Chronic Rift podcast. Billy Flynn of Geek Radio Daily is back with us here. Hey, Billy.
Hey, I'd see how you keep leaving the .com off so I don't hit my damn bell.
Oh, geez, I forgot the .com. Yeah.
You don't have to. It's fine.
And Krissy Myers, my co-host here on the Chronic Rift, and co-host on the new Guardian of Forever podcast. Hey, Krissy.
Hey, Captain.
I like it when you say... No, never mind.
Wait, there's a joke there that I'm not a part of. There's an inside joke there.
Oh, my.
I feel very weird.
Oh, and the person feeling very weird joining us for this hour is writer, editor of a book near and dear to my heart, Gotham City 14 Miles, a frequent guest on my podcast, the Batcave Podcast, and my co-host on, yes, another podcast, God help me, I'm doing, called The Hornet Sting, Mr. Jim Beard. Hey, Jim.
Hey, nice to be here. Yeah, when you drop over from podcast exhaustion, I guess I'll be the main host of the Hornet Sting, right?
That's right. So I've asked you, Jim, to join us here today, and you were more than willing to, especially on last-minute notice because we had some scheduling conflicts with our other co-hosts here, to talk about Star Trek's 50th anniversary. Before the break, we had Dan Persons talking about the series, and he was pointing out, the props that he's got there that he was looking at as he was recording the segment. And he talked about how sometimes we have a tendency to miss out on certain elements of what it is we really love about the show because we tend to fetishize the show. And I've got to ask, when it comes to Star Trek 50 years later, because he brings up also just the whole thing of like Shatner's waistline, the plywood sets. I don't know, do we really look at the show and that's like the first thing we look at these days? I mean, compared to, if this were 25 years ago, I'd say, yeah, we were still doing that. We were still, as we did at the beginning of this show, talking about Shatner's Get a Life sketch and all on Saturday Night Live. But and thanks in large part, I think, to the other shows that follow it. But do we really focus on Star Trek and still look at the warts and all of it? And do we also have that tendency to fetishize that we love our phaser more than we love the message of humanity and what we could potentially achieve.
You know, I was just talking with my wife about this last night. We were watching the marathon of it on BBC America. And I'm going the opposite way on this. I said to her, I said that I think in more recent days we've actually maybe focused a little too much on the, you know, the topical themes and the positive view of the future and all of that, and that we tend to forget that it's just a damn good science fiction show. That's how I go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, Billy, Krissy, like where do you stand when you think about the show?
I think that Jim brings up a very, very good point. I think in terms of the types of personalities fans tend to have, especially fans of Star Trek, we're very prone to focus on the minutia, whether it be the moral or the topical messages of individual episodes, or the phasers or the costumes, or the looks. I think that's something that's just inherent in modern fandom, and Star Trek's kind of the example of that. And I think that I think there's definitely some validity to what Dan is saying too, is that we get lost in the details, in the forest for the trees, so to speak, and we forget the sum of its parts and what really makes Star Trek, you know, live as strongly and as vivaciously as it has for the past 50 years.
The obsession can go both ways. You know, and sometimes I worry that it's going too far in, I don't know, the intellectual way, you know, that again, maybe I'm looking at it as a writer, as far as like I enjoy it on a storytelling level, on a character, you know, development level. I tend to, you know, now look for that scene in each episode, you know, that's just, you know, a feast for me as far as the wordplay. You know, I tend to look at it as a script, you know, more than anything. And I love all of the minutia, you know, I love, you know, the design of everything. But yeah, sometimes you know, I worry that we're going too far into the, you know, you know, this is an allegory of the Vietnam War, and we're getting a little tiny bit too, you know, intellectual about the whole thing. When we really should just be enjoying it, you know, as one of the best science fiction sagas ever.
And I think, in a sense, that Star Trek can definitely be comfort food, so to speak, for a lot of people.
Oh, you hit it, yes.
Oh yeah,
yes.
Star Trek is the comfort food for a lot of fans.
Yeah.
That's and I think that's I think that's when it's best. I think that's when it serves. That's when it functions the best. Is when it's somewhat comforting, where you can just sort of unabashedly love the thing. And I think that gets lost sometimes in terms of in fandom. I think there's a tendency, especially these days, to know everything and everything out of a TV series to sort of prove your cred, so to speak, instead of like letting your enthusiasm for the series shine. So, and I guess I'm coming from a point of, I've always been sort of a casual viewer of Trek in general, even though I'm still relatively familiar with the classic series. I haven't seen every episode. I've seen maybe half of them. And I'm sure I've maybe seen more, just not remembered them in full detail. But I like letting it wash over me and just sort of getting lost in that world. And it's a really comforting, familiar world, and I love the characters, and they're so classic and archetypical. They're almost mythical in a sense. I think Star Trek has kind of become part of modern popular culture mythology. Like, it's definitely such an integral part of 20th century pop culture.
What about for you, Billy?
I'm sorry. The next thing there, the unabashed love aspect of it, that's what is so hard to actually translate. It's much easier for a group of people to be able to focus on the symbolism or the cool gadgets and all of those things. It's easier to market towards that. But what brought everyone to Star Trek and what keeps us coming back is there's something in there. There's a bit of love. There's something that we saw of ourselves that we hoped for that moved us on a level that we can't really express, comfortably to other people. It's so hard to talk about that amongst geeks, and it's near impossible to market something that way. That's why I think we end up a lot of times more on the, live long and prosper, ha ha ha, beam me up, instead of discussing the actual aspects of the show that really make it what it is. It is modern. It's our future folklore. It's what we want our future to be. And we love it for that. And all the stories that it tells within that are great stories that we hope happen to us in our future.
Now, I'm sorry.
That I'm a dreamer,
No,
I don't know about you, but I don't want to get attacked by a giant amoeba out in space.
You kind of do, though, because you know that we're going to get through this because we're the good guys and we're going to do that.
Sure.
There comes a price. We knew when we picked up the lightsaber that we might actually have to face off against Vader. We knew when we did that, and we were willing.
No, we're mixing metaphors here. Wait,
well, no.
John, you told me this was a Star Trek show.
I have been told by many people that I know and love that the last few films have been Star Wars films, so I thought we were fair game. There, that's.
Oh, okay, yeah, you got that right.
Well, okay. Now, Jim, is it safe to say that it's... Well, all right, let me be more delicate here. When did you start watching Star Trek?
I was actually already alive when it started, but I don't have memories of first run. I was born in May of '65. So my first memories are first in syndication. So we're talking 69, 70. And funny thing about that is that when I first started watching it, I thought it was new. My dad had bought me a copy of The Making of Star Trek, the paperback. I think it's like Stephen Whitfield and Gene Roddenberry, as it says on there. But and I used to, run to the easy chair, to watch it when it was coming on, and I'd quickly thumb through the paperback to look up the episode. They had a little episode guide thing in the back of that. And I would be disappointed when I couldn't find an episode, and I didn't know that it was because that book came out while the show was on, and it only had first and second season listed of the original series. So if a third season episode came on, I felt like I didn't know what was going on, but those were good times. My dad always sat me down in front of the TV to watch things that he thought were good or, cool or whatever, and Star Trek was one of them. So I don't know, I was 4, maybe 5 years old when I first saw it.
And what about you, Billy?
It's syndication because, 71.
Yeah.
That's my math year there. So I don't remember there not being Star Trek.
Yeah.
It was something that was just always on. I was watching it since I was a little kid. I couldn't tell you the first time I saw it. I know that when I was 4, I had the Enterprise bridge and like the crew. I had the figures that everyone wishes they still had. I had that one. It's just something it's always been. The cartoon would be, would come on again Saturdays. You'd still find it UHF channels and stuff. So it's just kind of always been there. And I've just always known it's there. And it was in a prime afternoon slot. It would come on after Wild Wild West, and then Star Trek.
Ooh,
So
good lineup.
The parents liked Wild Wild West, so I got to see a bit of that and come to appreciate the goofier aspects because it wasn't the Gunsmoke that my grandma liked to watch. It was an interesting one. And then I got to watch, spaceships and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know when I started. I just know I've always watched it. It's always been a part of me.
Now, Krissy, in your case, you haven't seen, would you say, a lot of the episodes or most of the, how would you rate it? Because that's part of what we're doing with this podcast, the Guardian of Forever. Krissy and I are reviewing the episodes from the seasoned and the the not so seasoned viewer, what percentage would you give to having watched the series?
I would say I've seen at least 50% of the episodes.
Okay. All right.
And I guess even though I haven't seen all of them, I actually also have similar introduction stories to Star Trek as well in syndication, classic. Highly recommended by my mom, who did watch it during the first run of syndication in the early 70s. Actually, probably would have been old enough to watch it first run and remember, so like in the 60s. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's how I was introduced to it.
I used to argue with my my older siblings over the word Trek, because I thought it was called Star Trek. We were all on our way to, I think it was Cedar Point Amusement Park, and we passed a billboard that for some reason had an advertisement for Star Trek on it, probably because it was first in syndication or something like that. And my siblings noted that, and I said it's Star Trek. I said there is no such word as Trek. And we sat in the back seat of the car and argued back and forth on that. Very good memory.
Now, see, that's really weird. When I was in the second grade, I believe, I remember having that exact same argument, except I was telling this kid it was not Star Trek, it's Star Trek.
I was a little slower, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we're all in the same boat. For me, like you, Jim, 4 or 5 years old. I was born 1968. In fact, The Gamesters of Triskelion aired the night I was born. So that sort of informs you a little bit about my character. But 4 or 5 years old, and what it was actually, it wasn't my parents or anything. It was my next door neighbor, this elderly woman who would watch me quite often, and as a reward for doing a little reading or learning to spell. In particular, I still remember being in her kitchen, and she had an old Philco refrigerator, and she would cover the word Philco, and I had to spell out Philco, and if I could do that, then I'd watch Star Trek with her, or I'd watch the Evening Price is Right with Dennis James, or even the evening news. I mean, my first exposure to watching televised news programs, my parents watched it, but they never let us watch it because they felt that, we didn't need to be exposed to that. But my next door neighbor was like, okay, come on, sit down, watch Roger Grimsby and Bill Buttell reading about the grisly murders in New York City in the 70s.
Oh, bless her heart. Bless her heart. Wow.
So, yeah, she was something. She was something. But, and Tribbles, that was like the big thing. And I guess that's really then where my interest in writing, and I can attribute it all to, sadly, David Gerrold. Tear. The thing is, and this is what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, Jim, was that my one problem with this whole thing of 50th anniversary is that, and I know we're talking about there's been different incarnations of Trek, and you want to acknowledge that, but it's the 50th anniversary of the original series premiere.
Yeah.
And to me, that should have been the focus of all the promotions and such that were done. But not all of them were. I mean, a lot of them did, things with the original series, but they also did it with Next Gen and stuff. The New York Trek experience that I went to about a week or two ago, the bridge model that they used was Next Generation.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I feel like I've seen a lot of stuff online that if they put up an image, it's going to be of Kirk and Spock and McCoy. But I don't know. I mean, I guess it's because there's so much more Star Trek. That it adds up to more hours. Than the 79 original episodes. But that's how I'm looking at it. When we first started talking, I'm completely focused on, original series. And that's not to say I didn't like, the other stuff, but it was a diminishing return, for me as things went on, that, you know, nothing to me equals original, you know, Star Trek.
Well, that's completely valid, but you also have to look at it like Doctor Who. The 50th anniversary celebrated the entire all the versions, because much like Star Trek, it's the same show. Right. It's in the same universe. Even the movies, we've explained it. The whole thing is one big universe, and for some people, they found Star Trek a different way. My wife, she started watching Star Trek with me really at Enterprise. She knew of Star Trek. She had this idea, but she never really watched it. And I was going to watch Enterprise because I just finished Voyager, and I'm going to keep on trekking. So she started this with me, and then we get to the episode where the next week episode is going to be the Borg, and I stopped, and I was like, okay, look, this next episode, I don't really think you could watch this without some context, without like some real context. He's like, well, what do I need to do? I'm like, well, actually, you need to watch every episode of Star Trek that there's ever been. And she's like, yeah, do that. I was like, okay. So the compromise, we started watching Next Gen, and we watched all of Next Generation, and we did a couple of the original movies, and we got to First Contact. And after First Contact, I said, all right, we can watch Enterprise now. And with this big smile on her face, she went, it's the Borg, isn't it? So for her, Star Trek, Kirk and everything's fine, but for her, Star Trek really is Next Generation, because that's where she found her love and her appreciation for that universe.
Sure.
But yeah, we need more really cool short-skirted red shirt things. I'm for that.
And I must attest, I am significantly younger than you gentlemen, and I know people in my age quotient that like Star Trek got into it either through Next Gen or DS9 or Voyager, so it's definitely worth they're worth the do as well. And it's just like having a favorite Doctor. Some people start with William Hartnell, other people started with David Tennant, other people started with Tom Baker, and so on and so forth. Same thing.
Fair point. Let me ask you that. Now, this is something, too, it was just occurring to me now. Because we've talked about this on Cyborgs the Bionic podcast. I've talked about it on Batcave. You know, many of my guests come on, and they talk about when they were fans of the shows when they were on. And then, after a while, they sort of fell away. Now, the question is, I put to you, because, you know, there are those who say Batman, you loved it as a kid, you hated it as a teenager, and then you come back to appreciate it as an adult. Was there ever a time you fell away from Star Trek?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the dawning of the current film series.
Really?
Yeah. I had made a conscious decision when the first one was coming out. What was that? 2009?
I believe so.
Yeah. To not go and see it. And it was mostly because of that they had replaced actors in the roles, you know, that I loved. And I just, you know, I said that's fine for other people if they want to go and see it. I said it's just not for me, because for me it was Kirk is inseparable from William Shatner. Spock is inseparable from Leonard Nimoy, you know, and so on and so forth. They were characters that were created in part by those actors. You know, they didn't exist before the show came on, and everything that we knew about the characters was because of those actors. That, you know, they informed those characters, and especially I'm going to Leonard Nimoy. I know that Leonard Nimoy is in those, you know, first two movies. I get that. I know that. So again, it was just a conscious decision on my part. I didn't like what I was seeing. You know, every trailer, everything, it just didn't feel, you know, right to me. So the whole world seemingly fell in love with those movies, and I don't know. Yeah, it all fell away with me. I didn't even think I was. I don't even think I was watching, original episodes on, DVD or anything at that time. And the new Star Wars movie came out, and my love for Star Wars, was rekindled. And it had been a while since I really felt anything for Star Trek, and I'm feeling that all over again right now for the 50th anniversary. So, yeah, the new movies almost killed it for me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Billy?
I know. Yeah, go ahead.
Billy, what about you, Billy? Have you ever fallen out of Trekdom?
There was the Xindi War went on entirely. It went on entirely too long, and there was a moment there during that run, that season, where I was like, oh God. I was like, this just doesn't fit. This is so wrong. There's been nothing that has ever referenced anything that could possibly happen. They promised us that this show was going to lead to, how the original series was. This just doesn't make any sense. And I thought about it. I thought about it then. I really did. But no, not really. It's kind of always been there. I've had different comics to read when there were no shows on, because there was a time when you couldn't watch anything whenever you wanted to. So there was a time when there wouldn't be a show, but there would still be the occasional book, or there was comic. But no, I've always been there, even after Nemesis. Even if I kept believing, and I get what people say about the new movies. I get all of that, but I read the comics, which they couldn't make the people look like the people, so I understood that the actors and the characters, and I got all of that, but I've not really had a problem with the characters themselves, as long as I felt they were the characters being different, not being exactly the same. So the new movies, I've loved them, and they did a wonderful comic, Star Trek Countdown, that the events that Spock talks about, the whole thing with Nero and the red matter and all of this. This is a 4-issue series that does that essentially is post the last, original series, Next Generation. It's all of that, because we still get to wrap up where all the Next Generation casts are, where DS9 people are. We get to see a little bit of all of them tell this story, and that comic ends with Spock going through the wormhole. So for me, that comic, maybe that's what did it, but that comic tied everything together, and I went into this movie like, all right, I'm in a Star Trek parallel universe. I'm happy. Let's do this.
All right, Krissy, does the question apply to you?
Was there ever a time you forgot that Star Trek existed, even though you had remembered it once?
No. No, I've always been pretty pro Star Trek. But again, perhaps it's because I've always had such a casual relationship with it, and would just watch it if it were on, or if I were in the mood to watch it.
It never had the chance to hurt you. That's what it was.
No, it hasn't had the chance to hurt me, and I've kept an emotional distance from it that it has yet to hurt me. Although I've seen all the movies.
It can be a fickle lover.
Yeah,
I can imagine. Well, 50 years. I imagine it's probably similar to being a Doctor Who fan, which I've seen all of, and I mean all of it.
Wow. Even the lost episodes.
Whatever's been made available, yes.
Yeah, well.
See, for myself, Billy, I think it was around the same time, the Xindi War. It did go on way too long. As much as I did find it interesting, it went on way too long. I was getting jaded. Then they moved Enterprise to Friday nights, which just made it impossible as someone in his early 30s, and who also was dealing with his first newborn. So in fact, to be perfectly honest, I have yet to see Star Trek Nemesis.
Really?
I've never seen. My son was a few months old when the movie came out. I wasn't going to go see it then, and I was starting to get jaded with Star Trek. as it was. And I think from the point of probably towards the end of Enterprise's run up until, and this is going to be the interesting thing, Jim, up until the first movie, I pretty much had fallen out of Star Trek. And this was from a guy who, you know, saw every movie, who watched every incarnation of the TV show, who had made every attempt to get a Star Trek novel published back in the days when John Ordover and Dave Stern had open submissions for authors, who was in constant contact with Bob Greenberger over at DC Comics, who was trying to nurture me into a comic book writer, and you know, because I was trying to see if I could get a fill-in issue type deal, and it never worked out. Who I mean, I loved the show. I loved and breathed it from the age of 4. And I completely fell out. I just didn't care. I'd hear, you know, Star Trek's coming back, you know, when after, you know, shortly after in the movie. And even when the movie first was being mentioned, I was kind of like, whatever. But I went to see it out of curiosity. I will admit, it's not my Star Trek, but it was a fun movie just the same. And I didn't feel like, say, other reboots or what have you, that it wasn't worthy of the name Star Trek. It just wasn't as good as some of the other Trek we saw. The second movie... I don't even want to talk about the second movie, but the third movie is a wonderful film. It's an absolutely wonderful film, and it does deserve the name Star Trek attached to it. And sadly, because of the second movie, and because maybe some people are already getting a little jaded with, and this is why I'm a little nervous about the TV show, I think people are starting to get a little jaded of Star Trek already, that the third movie didn't get the proper box office revenue it deserved.
Well, see, therein lies the problem, is that whole aspect, the picking apart and not just loving that it is still there. I mean, it doesn't have to be your favorite episode every time. It doesn't. But I think we can agree. As a people, that even the new Star Trek films have been better than the Xindi War and better than Nemesis. And if we can get past that, as long as they're trying to give us actual, real, honest Star Trek stories, I think we have to be happy with that. Because my controversial stance is, as much as I love the original series, if you really push me for it, I'm going to tell you my favorite Trek is DS9.
Yes.
Because I loved, you know, Kirk and the crew and reading the comics, and they would have these occasional ones where they would get to do shore leave or actually come back to Earth. I was always fascinated by, well, what's the rest of the world like? And Deep Space Nine was the first time I really got that feel of what everything else was like in that universe. So if we can stop giving me, you know, I don't necessarily need the same crew in space trying to find aliens. Just give me the universe, but you can find ways to tell good stories that way. We'll come back if we want to.
And to my understanding, DS9 is unique in that there is a very distinct continuity to DS9 that makes it kind of stand out from the rest of the franchise. And you do get immersed in the world, and a lot of people cite DS9 as their favorite because of that.
I was going to say, I think that things really changed with that. Go ahead.
Oh. Excuse me, no, I just meant in the first season they dropped hints of things that happened in season 7. So yeah, they really had this overall idea of where they were going.
Well, it was. I'm sorry. I was just going to say it was the first show where, like you say, Billy, they drop hints. I mean, they never did anything without it ever being picked up. I mean, sometimes it was to the detriment of the show, like the very ending of the series, where it's like, oh, we got to still wrap up this whole thing with, you know, the PA rates and all that kind of stuff. Frankly, could have done without it. Honestly, that was like one thing that never interested me that much. But, you know, I still give them credit for saying, no, we talked about it here. We're going to finish it up here. There is a lot of times, especially obviously in the original series, because it was episodic, where things would be mentioned. You're like, that's really cool. And it was like completely forgotten the next week or even further down the line, where you could have brought it up as a story element. And it was like, no, we're just doing something totally different.
And then we never got a resolution to the temporal Cold War in Enterprise.
No, and that's the biggest cheat of them all, because frankly, the temporal Cold War was stupid to begin with. To me, that was dumber than the Xindi War.
Oh, excuse me. But time travel's always been fun with Star Trek. So, I don't know. I guess I was fascinated, a little more interested in it as to exactly what were they going to do with it than what they ended up doing with the Xindi. Our big shadowy figure, are we on the same page? Is that really Archer from the future?
See, I thought that.
Yeah. Maybe they realized that everybody knew that and decided we should go a different way.
Maybe. I just get the feeling that they probably thought, hey, we've been pretty good with time travel stories so far. Let's make it an overarching theme for Enterprise for the first season. And it's like, ugh. It just, that's what kind of like, I started like first season, second season, and they had that overarching thing, but they still had their self-contained episodes, and it felt a little bit too much like Voyager and Next Gen. Then third season, at least with the Xindi, they were kicking it up a notch. The big problem with the Xindi War, and Andrew Leyland said this as well over at the Palace of Glittering Delights, is just that you didn't need 24 episodes to tell it. If they had done it tighter, it would have been a better storyline.
Yeah.
You know?
You can say that about, lots of things. I think there's, a good point in there. It's going to be really interesting to see what the new Star Trek series is like as far as its construction. Personally, I like episodic. I think sometimes when we got those bigger, longer storylines, in the later shows, that's where my mind started to drift. To me, there's a beauty in episodic, the done in one story. But see, I would argue that there is actual character development in original series. Especially with Spock. I think, it shows how much more comfortable in his skin he grows, over the 3 seasons. But again, it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to handle, the new series, because you're bringing up a lot of really good arguments against, for me, I guess, against, these longer storylines, where one episode, melds into another, and not knowing when to end them or losing track of them. That's happened in TV a lot. Hello, Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And you lose people. I'd like to see a movement maybe back towards more episodic, but with those threads, those ongoing threads still there, but maybe not taking such a huge part of the show. You can develop characters in episodic television, and tell your story and then get out. I'd like to see a little more of a return to that.
Right. Well, I'm hopeful about this. On the one hand, I'm always hesitant when I hear new Star Trek, but I'm hopeful about this because the caliber of people who are behind it. I mean, you got Nick Myers, you've got Kristen Bear, who's written Star Trek novels, and I'm kind of hoping that since she's in there, that she can sneak in David Mack at some point, because he wrote 2 of the best DS9 episodes in the entire series, and he continues to write great Star Trek novels. But I'm hopeful about it because they know they've only got 13 episodes. So they've got to mark. Now, I say all that, but then you get someone like Stephen Moffat who knows he's got 13 episodes, and yet still he seems to be all over the place. I'm sorry, going off on a tangent, but... but with all that going for it, I've got a good hope for it. What I'm really curious to see is how well they stick to the premise that it's not going to be focused on the captain. It's focused on a subordinate.
Well, the subordinate though, but it's the first officer, right?
Is it the first officer? Okay, I didn't realize that.
First officer.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
That made me feel a little weird because I was like, one of the best Next Generation episodes from the later years was that Below Decks that focused on like the younger officers who weren't directly tied to the action. And I was like, oh, well, something like that sort of off perspective, which is what I enjoyed about DS9, that different perspective. How different is it from the first officer's point of view? I guess that's what the show is going to tell us.
Mm-hmm. In some ways, I think that was sort of what they were trying to do with Next Gen, with Riker. And I think it's just that Patrick Stewart, is such a fine actor, such a fascinating guy that you know it went back toward to Picard. But I feel like I saw that Gene, you know, repeated the whole geez, I've forgotten Ilea and Decker thing, you know, with Riker and Troy. That I feel like that was probably his original focus. So again, maybe they're going back to that. They're you know, hopefully looking back across all of Star Trek and trying to bring up some of these elements. My real concern with the new Star Trek is this sort of obsession with checking off boxes as far as their characters, you know, go, that they're putting such a focus on, well, we have this type of character and we have this type of character, instead of letting that thing happen a little bit more organically, you know. And I wish they were talking more about what kinds of stories that they, you know, want to tell, and let us discover these characters you know, as we go along, and instead of, you know, making sure you have every type of, you know, orientation, you know, gender, political background, or whatever along the ways. You know, that's great. We'll find out those things as we go along, you know, instead of having press conferences about them.
Today, our African American, gay, Jewish atheist joins the show. Yeah,
I think people are going to come to Star Trek, you know, without that. They're you know, they're going to they should already feel comfortable that they're going to see you know, a diverse, you know, selection of characters and beings, you know. Again, you know, it's like, just, you know, relax, it's Star Trek. You know, we're gonna be fine, you know. But again, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what types of stories, you know, that they want to tell, and whether they're going to do this episodic thing or you know, overarching plots.
I don't know. I will say, Dan Persons had mentioned in his piece about whether or not he was going to pay $6 to watch this.
I hear you. I'm there too.
You know, I might be inclined for two reasons. Here's the thing. If this showed up on Netflix, we wouldn't think anything of it, because most of us are already buying into Netflix anyway. But Netflix is its own thing. It's not, here's Netflix and here's the Netflix channel on TV, and if it's like, if you want more. There's something inherently odd about CBS, a television network, having a streaming channel that it's like, and now you're going to pay us more to get this content. And I also don't see what else they're offering in the way of original programming, because frankly, you know, Michael Faulkner had said to me, oh, you know, this will be good though. I might just do it because I can watch Big Bang Theory. I'll catch up on it. And there's the other Star Treks. I said, Michael, TBS, your local syndication, they're showing Big Bang. Star Trek is on Netflix, Amazon, Hulu. My only concern is I get this weird feeling that come December, they're all going to get yanked from the streaming channels, because that would be the strategy that CBS should be doing to make sure that they're going to get people to come watch the new series. It's like, you're also going to get the old series as well. Speaking of which, I thought it kind of odd that to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, we're watching a Star Trek marathon on BBC America here in the States.
Isn't that weird?
You noticed that too, right?
I mean, the Sci-Fi Channel showed some movies,
right?
But yeah, the show itself, BBC America, and I'm like, okay.
You know, and there are other channels. MeTV has the rights to it. Heroes and Icons has the rights to it. Decades has episodes that they show from time to time to tie in with whatever event is going on that day. None of them could do even a small marathon?
Well, the 50th here has been treated exactly the way you're talking about fans discussing the show. They've put out all kinds of promos. They've talked about all the stuff that you can buy, but there has been nothing in the way of showing, okay, here's why we love the show. Here's a collection of this or that. Nothing. They didn't care at all. They just decided, hey, it's an anniversary. People buy things during an anniversary. Let's put stuff out.
On the contrary, here it's been quite celebrated. On Thursday, they had a big public screening of The Man Trap in the park down the street from my house.
Nice.
There's a Star Trek 50-year exhibit opening up at the Tiff Bell Lightbox very soon. And Space aired a marathon.
See, that makes sense. Space running a marathon.
Yeah.
Space ran a marathon, yeah.
Yeah.
Why do
We're
I
just
not-
living in the wrong place, guys.
Guess so. Yeah, you're
Canada's where it's at. The politics are way less crazy, and the Star Trek is plentiful.
okay, fuck you, hipster.
I mean, and not only that, BBC America not only showing the marathon, but first and second season they promoted as uncut, which I thought was also odd. I'm like going, third season don't get that love? And they're showing the episodes with the updated special effects.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I like how that's been done, that it's not intrusive. It's just, okay, well, this would look like this.
Mm-hmm. It's not.
But they still haven't replaced the string puppet aliens in Cat's Paw. I'm like, when I first started seeing those, the new special effects, it's like I was so excited to get to Cat's Paw, and I'm like, finally we get to see these aliens the way they should be, the little things. And spoiler alert, but and then it gets to that, and it's still the string puppet aliens. Very disappointing.
I was very much against the updating of the effects on the show.
Yeah, I was too in the beginning. I'm to the point where I just don't care right now. It's like, okay, whatever. But yeah, I was kind of against it in the beginning.
I was against it, but then I watched it, and I was like, this is beautiful. This is actually, and not only just the spaceship effects with the Enterprise and the other space shots, but the repainting of backgrounds of sets and stuff like that was very well done. And the thing is, it's now to the point, sadly, that I can't watch the originals. If the original pops up, if I see it on a screening of something, I look away. It's cringing. I actually prefer the new effects because it sort of blends the 60s now with next. It like makes it more like tied in together.
You know why it works? It looks pretty much the same way that the original series universe looked in the DS9 episode Trials and Tribulations.
Yeah.
Because it's the same, it's the model itself, but it's still got that same look it did in the DS9 one, and that still has that wonderful sense of continuity for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's so okay. We're actually coming up on the 9 o'clock hour here, so we need to start wrapping things up. I'm going to ask each of you, just go around, final thoughts, final comments. Star Trek 50 years later, what have you got to say? Billy Flynn, we'll start with you, because you've always got something to say.
Me? I don't know what you're talking about. Like I said, Star Trek has always been around. Everywhere, everything, it's just always been there. It is what I know as the origination for every bit of sci-fi interest that I have. I'm Star Wars fan. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I remember Star Wars coming out. I was excited because I was a fan of stuff like this because of Star Trek. I remember watching Space 1999 on TV simply because, it's people in space, kind of like in Star Trek. I'm a huge fan of all these other shows. Let's go ahead and jump to Firefly because we have to make that connection. How beautiful is that? To this day, my love of sci-fi, every aspect of it, whether it's the space stuff, whether it's the harder sci-fi, whether it's the weirdness of Philip K. Dick, whatever it is, it all came from the fact that at some point in time, where I don't even remember, I was set down in front of a TV and I went on a voyage with the Enterprise. Everything about my geekdom originates from Star Trek. So thank you.
All right, Krissy?
I'm thankful for it to be. I'm thankful that it's around. I think that not only is Star Trek, I think, important to people's individual relationships with science fiction fandom. I think that without Star Trek, we wouldn't have that fandom today as we know it. And I think it's really played an excellent role in bringing people together and uniting people and inspiring people to achieve great things. And I just like to say thank you, Star Trek. Thank you, Gene Roddenberry. Thank you for everything that you've done and everything you've inspired.
Okay. Jim?
A little bit of everything that Billy and Krissy just said. Especially, thank you, Gene. Let's remember, the man right here. I remember very clearly the day he died, and how how hard that hit my household. Both, my wife and I are huge Star Trek fans. And I want to hit back on the comfort food thing. That is so true, and especially what Billy said about, you know what you get. You get a voyage on the Enterprise or on, the Voyager or whichever, But I think for me it really boils down to this: not too bad for a show that, while it was on, was not that popular. That a lot of people wanted to try to get rid of, that the cast was fairly destitute once it ended, and wasn't sure where their lives were going to go. So not too bad for the little tiny show that almost didn't. And here we are 50 years later with just this amazing smorgasbord of Star Trek, spread out before us, that we can pick and choose from, what we want to watch, hundreds of episodes, how many movies, books, action figures, comics, just incredible. And Billy touched on Star Wars, so I feel like I get to do that too. To me, there's never been an argument between the two of what's better. Two different things. And you can love both, and I'm a testament to that, and so many other people are too. You can love both. Two different things. You cannot compare them. Does Star Wars should it give a nod to Star Trek? Absolutely, and I know that George Lucas has said that. The little show that almost didn't, but it did, and here we are.
Right. Yeah. For myself, it's funny, yeah. I mean, definitely everything you guys have said, but, one of the things you always hear stories from DeForest Kelley or Nichelle Nichols or Jimmy Doohan, or even, from the more modern day cast and stuff, they hear stories from people who come up to them and go, your character inspired me to do this. I was an astronaut because of you. I became a linguist because of you. I became an engineer because of you and what Star Trek proposes. I became a writer because of Star Trek. I mean, when we were kids and sitting around and when Star Trek was on and my brothers and sisters or friends were over and being kids and stuff, you'd start pretending you were, the characters and playing, and the kids would go, I'm Spock, I'm Kirk, I want to be this one and stuff. And they'd look at me and they'd say, which one do you want to be? Because I'd sit there quiet. I never would shout out like they would, and they'd argue. They go, which one are you going to be? I'm like, I want to be the guy that puts the words in their mouth. And I still remember that to this day. And I'm thankful that despite my gap in my love for the show that I have it, I'm thankful for the chance that I did get finally an opportunity, even though it wasn't a novel, it wasn't, paperback. Well, actually, it did eventually come out in paperback. I got the opportunity to write a Star Trek story in the Starfleet Corps of Engineers series called Paradise Interrupted. Links will be provided if you want to get a copy. He says with the sad plug. But yeah, I'm thankful for all that. I'm thankful for the chance to have met some of the stars of the original series, to have had them on the original Chronic Rift public access show. We had George Takei, Majel Barrett, Mark Leonard on the show. So and also getting to know fans and writers of the books that have come out since then, from Margaret Wander Bonanno, as I mentioned, all the way up to David Mack. I'm very thankful for getting to meet them and such. So it's been a wonderful ride, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the next, as many of them as I can see, as I can be around for 50 years to come, have to offer. So, Okay, as we come to the end of this episode of the Chronic Rift, one last little bit of business here to do. I'd like to give my guests an opportunity to just sort of like let us know what's going on in their little worlds on the internet here and stuff, and how we can keep up with them. And we'll start with Billy Flynn.
Well, easy enough. You can find everything pretty much at geekradiodaily.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter and all those crazy things. We took a week off for Labor Day, but the daily shows will be starting again on Monday, and theoretically we'll have another Sweekly available for people tomorrow if all goes well.
Oh, cool. All right. Yeah, because your last Sweekly was your fall TV preview.
Yeah, we decided to talk about the stuff coming up, and this time we have a con review for a con not a lot of people knew about. Ooh, foreshadowing.
Okay, cool. Jim?
Yeah, please look me up on Amazon, and you'll see all my books there. And I have my quote-unquote fan page on Facebook. I hate calling it that, called The Beard, the Jim Beard fan page. You can look up the Gotham City 14 Miles page on Facebook also. And I'm on Twitter, although I still haven't fully grasped how Twitter works, but I'm trying. So lots of fun, cool stuff going on.
And you also have a great new podcast called The Hornet Sting.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yes. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And we got one episode out there, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
To celebrate the 50th anniversary of the first episode that premiered yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another one that no one's really talking about.
All right, Krissy?
Yep. You can find me on the Twitter at Krissy_Myers. You can find me here every week on the Chronic Rift. And you can find myself and Mr. John S. Drew at the helm of the Guardians of Forever podcast.
Woohoo!
Our new Star Trek podcast.
Yes. In fact, you and I have to talk about our next recordings after this show. Yes. And as for myself, I will always say chronicrift.com. Head on over. I mean, it's not just about this podcast. We've got a bunch of other pop culture podcasts over there, including The Hornet Sting, Guardian of Forever podcast, other exclusives like the Weekly Podioplex from Michael Faulkner, and the OSI Files and the Batcave podcast that I'm also doing. Actually, I need to get back on the stick with OSI Files, but that's another story. So, gentlemen, lady, I'd like to thank you very much for getting up this early in the morning. I know it's tough sometimes for this, but it works out because it allows me to do what I love, which I do appreciate, but it also allows me to also keep this podcast going because there's no other way I could really do it these days.
Happy to do it. Happy to be here.
You're blaming us?
No, not at all.
Feeding your addiction? Is that what you're saying right now?
Well,
should we have an intervention podcast?
There is that. You do feed my addiction.
Yeah.
There's
when he comes out with the Time Tunnel podcast, then I know we really need to sit him down and
no. The Time Tunnel in Color podcast.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be called.
I know someone with the Time Tunnel podcast.
Oh.
Really?
It's not John. Yes.
Really?
Oh, you have just made my day.
Yes.
That's great.
I gotta find this. Is he on iTunes?
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask.
Is there a Wizards and Warriors podcast?
I don't know if there's a Wizards and Warriors
podcast. I'm trying to think of something
podcast.
obscure.
Well, we want to talk about that acid rain stuff, yeah.
Oh, now you got me thinking.
I want to do the Kids from Caper podcast, but nobody wants to do that one with me.
When are we going to do the animated Dungeons and Dragons cartoon?
Yeah, hey, I'm there.
Oh, there you go.
Come on, John. You got time, obviously.
I've got time, obviously.
Yeah, you can do a few more.
Oh, Dungeons and Dragons! Oh my God. Okay, I got to stop. You know what? Let me start rolling the music here and get us out of this, cause otherwise we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So, folks, stay tuned. Next week is actually going to be a pre-recorded episode because I have to be away at a academic competition with my high school students. but we'll be back 2 weeks from now live. So until next time, once again, Krissy, Jim, Billy, thank you very much, everyone. Take care.